Welcome, Squishtronic, visitor number 006289. Initiating Squishcast 000. Begin transmission.
Hello there. Okay, so welcome to Squishcast 0. Hope everyone's new year is going along smashingly so far. Here I'm going to talk some state of affairs, topics including social justice and some scandals, and some of the particulars of the channel and its aim as well. I'll start with the channel stuff first, just to sort of get that out of the way. So, this whole thing is sort of a short precursor for what will become a regular series of hopefully longer podcasts, though I don't know how frequent. I feel like I have a lot to communicate, but when I'm typing a script or hitting the record button, it's kind of difficult to somehow just start talking. But whatever, let's just see where this goes. If anything, I'm just kind of planting a seed right now. I'm typically not a New Year's resolution kind of guy, but I'm trying to change some of my production habits. I won't bore you too much with it, but part of this might be summarized with the maxim of done is better than perfect. I'm going to allow myself to make more mistakes for the long-term benefit of myself and my audience. Hopefully that translates into a faster production schedule. Not saying cut me some slack, but I'd never done any video editing and effects before 2016, and I barely know how to use audio production software. So yeah, I have a lot to learn before I ever make, say, a Putin on the Ritz music video, huh? How do you guys feel about puns? Personally, I'm a big fan of them, so. I'm going to try to just focus on the audio aspect of these podcasts, as the name might imply. People need stuff they can just listen to and really zone in on while they're at work or whatever, but without having to actually commit to looking at a video. I might throw in some visuals though. That's kind of the current paradigm of the information age. There are a lot of voices and messages to be heard, but there's only so much time. It makes sense to stack your tasks as much as possible by not having to be anchored to a redundant sensory data stream. Plus it saves me some effort and time on the graphical work side, which I'll need for this other visual analysis video series I want to do in the future, and you'll see what that's about later. I don't know if it's a product of me getting older, or just the notion that truth or knowledge is inherently interesting that's made information and entertainment bleed into each other so much, despite the connotation infotainment carries that probably describes what this channel's going to be. It is in my nature to be a pedantic asshole. The operative word there is asshole, because statistically speaking, there's no way anyone can be right about everything all the time, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to try. Maybe I'll discover which things I was wrong about along the way. It's in my best interest to locate flaws and make corrections to myself. Hopefully others do the same when they come across my content. At very least, they might get a laugh out of it. Speaking of which, I still have a lot of work to do on my regressive video series, which includes many people and fallacies I haven't covered yet. No True Scotsman's probably next, but let me know if there's someone or something else that you think takes priority. I've actually got a lot of examples gathered, which is what happens when encountering these same arguments again and again. I still have to put them into scripts and do the graphic work and whatnot, but other than that, I think I can get a good amount of entries into the series in 2017. As for some of the people who are on my list of discontent and slated for their own commercials, in no particular order they include Lena Dunham, Michael Moore, Francesca Ramsey, Trevor Noah, Whoopi Goldberg, Jesse Williams, and Justin Trudeau. That being said, I want to talk briefly about the phenomenon known as social justice, but not so much social justice itself, rather the counterculture it's created, the counter-entertainment culture it's created, and what happens next when the hostile liberals and SJWs shrink to a, let's say, negligible amount. The war's not over yet, but I think their forces are essentially in retreat, at least in America anyway. If you're on this side of YouTube and listening to this, you probably know how many of the politically incorrect or exclusively anti-SJW channels have sprung up in the last couple years. It seems that many individuals have sparked into action against these cultural Marxists, and that's great. There's still much work to be done, but I think we've made it over the hill. The hardest part is over, and that is symbolized by the election of Trump, whether you agree with him or not. His election was the manifestation of several things, I'd say. The culmination of American counterculture spirit, independent reach made strong from the internet starting to erode the stranglehold of legacy media, and common sense and reason recognizing the mass lunacy that's been occurring from the street to the university to the State House. This was a course correction away from progressivism. Canada's going to be the experiment where such a correction didn't occur. It'll be interesting to see how they're doing in a couple of decades. I'm legitimately curious about that. But I digress. Back to social justice. It was always my plan to have an entertainment website, a video channel, along with some other things, but I didn't think that they'd start to manifest themselves as pushback against an authoritarian, secular dogma that was ushering in a barbaric, religious dogma, all under the guise of virtue and tolerance. What useless words those are now. When I was cartooning more often last year, I began showing some level of dissidence against these kinds of stories and news. I don't even consider myself political per se, certainly not in my history. Philosophical maybe, but more accurately, my idea of a good time is getting drunk and bitching about live-action Resident Evil movies while I watch them. I bet I could talk about that way longer. But anyway, despite being apolitical, now politics are just in my way. I make videos now against this stuff, but I'm eager to not have to. I mean, I know I don't have to. No one's holding a gun to my head or anything, but somewhere inside me, I'm compelled to argue against claims I'm not allowed to argue against, so in that sense I had to. And I currently still have to. In a way, I should thank the tumult and disorder created from liberal emotionalism. It's helped me sharpen my arguments and even shift on some issues that I was just taking as true, but hadn't challenged before. But anyway, when this stuff is finally largely seen as the obvious farce that it is, then I'll be able to create with the greatest freedom yet. I'll talk about the kind of ideas that are stimulating, worthwhile, and maybe difficult, to me anyway. I want to talk about ideas that might be considered dangerous, that potentially are as terrifying as they are terrific. I suppose the bottom line is that political correctness is a vile antagonist of free thought, art, invention, science, logic, truth, and so much more. Supposedly, everyone has an agenda, and I guess I'd be included. Well, if I had such an explicit agenda, you could bet your bottom dollar political correctness would be standing right in the way of it. It's an obstacle that must be destroyed if a future that I want to be a part of is ever to be. In other words, Squishtronic isn't merely dedicated to addressing the low-hanging fruit of social justice alone. Less channels like wrecked feminist videos and the like, but there will be much more to talk about once the megaphone-wielding SJ weenies become endangered, hopefully within the next year or two. I'm not holding my breath, but I could see that happening. Sure, you'll have your hardcore holdouts, but I think a lot of people will slowly realize that they've been the hosts to parasitic ideologies, and will just quietly turn back into normal people again, never admitting that they were ever once one of these purple-haired militant activists. Okay, change of pace here. So now I want to address how the last several weeks have been pretty weird for me. What I came across served to burn me out on politics for one, but also just real shit as a whole. Some of you might dismiss this straight out of hand, but after weeks of binging on the topic, rabbit hole after rabbit hole, I got put in a kind of a bad mental spot. It seems this Pizzagate thing has a lot of validity to it, just a lethal amount of smoke. I can't go into it in depth right now. I might cover it in another video series this year maybe, but it already kind of goes beyond the scope of this channel, kind of. I think the Kraus Sleuths have done a tremendous job putting this stuff together. What it needs is that all-important presentation to get the message across. I don't know if I'm one to fit that role. Bit of a tangent here. Old media is floundering, and they know it. I mean, they so desperately want to get a handle on the dialogue that their last attempts at silencing other voices involved just calling them fantasies and fake news. I know everybody's talked this fake news bit to death already, but it bears repeating. As a society, we're all the way down to just saying, your news is fake. No, your news is fake. We're in the age of the internet, and instead of epistemological clarity, we just get epistemological chaos. I can even start to sympathize with some of these brainwashed SJWs. Speaking of regressive, I gotta tell you, back in the early days of college, where I actually watched the Colbert Report, I never thought I'd have a 180 on Stephen Colbert. As a level 1 atheist, I guess it was easy enough to side with the secular liberals on most issues, just by default. Of course, I'm still an atheist. It'd be pretty difficult to undo that pill, but I don't know exactly what you'd call my political classification as of now. I know we got a new batch of classical liberals distinguishing themselves from these progressive liberals, but for me, I think it's just easier to go issue by issue. I see the problems with religions, but I also see how each one is different. I see the pitfalls of democracy and majority rule, especially when conjoined with mass immigration, and doubly so when conjoined with all this anti-white and anti-American rhetoric that does the opposite of promoting assimilation. So it sounds maybe like I'm leaning toward Randian objectivism, but I have a ton of reading to do before I unequivocally start brigading on behalf of any one political philosopher, if ever. I don't know what I don't know, and I only know that I know nothing, as douchey and cliché as that sounds. I don't know if certain things that I regard are right, if such a pure answer can exist for certain questions, but I do know when progressivism is wrong just by its own internal contradictions, and the wrath evoked for pointing them out. It's just another religion. I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. So what I noticed about liberals is that they tend to argue from an emotional basis more often, which is probably why Hollywood and these Daily Show type programs are so effective, because they often appeal to emotion. But anyway, what Colbert is doing to undermine the Pizzagate scandal is just indescribably disgusting to me. It doesn't even address a fraction of the evidence and does the standard guilt by association thing. It's not even spin, it's full-blown lies by omission and dishonesty at this point. All I can do is sigh until I get my house in order here. Hanlon's razor stipulates not to ascribe to conspiracy that which can be explained by incompetence, but the sheer quantity of red flags raised throughout any casual investigation of this invites Occam's razor to override Hanlon's. Among competing hypotheses, the one with the fewest assumptions should be selected. At this point, you'd have to be making miles of assumptions to dispute the likelihood of nefarious activity that's occurring here. One more point before I get off this. What isn't a rumor or a supposed conspiracy theory is that human and child trafficking exists and to a very large scale. That's not a conspiracy theory. There's been recent crackdowns on high-ranking pedophiles in Canada and Norway. That's not a conspiracy theory. The Franklin scandal and Dutroux affair are documented events, and those aren't conspiracy theories. The aforementioned non-conspiracy theories are arguably less plausible than this current one. Is it that far-fetched to consider it? Not enough people talk about this kind of thing, I guess. Who can blame them? This is heavy stuff. Doesn't exactly make for dinner conversation. Look, the WikiLeaks emails, DC Pizza Joint, and Podesta brothers at the center of this are just the tip of the iceberg. They're just a part, it seems, of a larger, more persistent problem. Even if they abscond somewhere, investigations have been sparked, and the mimetic presence of this in people's minds will make it harder than ever to deny or obfuscate this. I'm not sure where I should stop talking on this point, but I have some reason to believe that Trump's national security advisor and maybe a subset of the FBI are biding their time until after inauguration to start approaching this. At least in regards to this, I really don't want to make it about partisanship. There seems to be some people from both major parties involved. It just so happens that the Clinton Foundation is a big part of it. Follow the facts wherever they may lead. I'm kind of afraid to, though, considering the amount of mysterious deaths involved with people who are in a position to expose certain elements of the Clintons, the DNC, or even some other aspects of the government. I really did get burnt out reading about all this. Like I said, I wish I could tackle this properly, but my plate is full as it stands. I do, however, take comfort in the fact that more people seem to be privy to this than I would initially expect. So I've become all serious and dark about this, which is appropriate, but I think the way to get messages across, especially heavy messages like these, is to make them less difficult to digest. Sometimes that includes irreverent meme warfare or funny videos. Whatever gets people talking, I suppose. Just when I thought going against the Islamic political arm without people just shutting off was hard enough. There's gonna be some tough battles ahead. Don't believe what I say right now, I totally get it. If you're interested in this developing thing, I can recommend these two users and also vote.co/v/Pizzagate. There's a lot of information there to get you up to speed. Okay, seriously, moving on. I'll try not to end this thing on such a dark note. So before all this, I was starting to delve into differing political philosophies, and I got a lot of study ahead of me. There's going to be some fun and some hard messages to convey in the future for sure, but ultimately they will be for good, and maybe the challenge will be for the better. That starts to tie into my own dominant philosophy, both ontological and political, that in my mind has only grown in strength throughout the years. It's not a contender quite yet, and it needs a lot of conceptual battle testing. I'll do that in future videos, hopefully when things start to calm down a bit more. Anyway, I'm excited for this new year. There's a lot of crazy stuff around the corner, both good and bad. Nobody's sure of anything really. There's a lot of certain people out there, and that makes me inherently uncertain. Still though, I'm inclined to expect 2017 to be a great year. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. At least more people are aware than before, and hey, at least we're in the middle of history in the making, right? Before I wrap things up here, I should give a bunch of thanks. Thanks to all you subscribers, huge thanks to AIU for mirroring my vids and giving me exposure, thanks to Sargon and the Gadfather for retweeting or sharing my stuff, thanks for all the amazing comments that have really given me a lot of drive these last 6 months or so, thanks for all the terrible comments letting me know how awful my voice is, and mad thanks to my patrons on Patreon that really put a hop in my step and some food in my fridge. It is much appreciated. I'm aiming for the day where I can run this full-time and get better equipment, so consider joining in on the fun with the cool kids over there. Okay, enough money badgering. Oh, and on the topic of the new year, new stuff, like an idiot, I didn't realize I could maybe have some merch for sale before Christmas. So now that it's over, there's probably not a lot of incentive to peruse my wares, all 3 of them. No, but I'm gonna be adding a bunch of items, and there'll be plenty of time for new designs, merch, content, and ideas this year, so stick around for that, my nerds.
I do believe that concludes this first Proto Squishcast. I hope you found it enjoyable. Thanks for listening, and remember, don't be squishy, be Squishtronic.
End transmission.